Adrenal fatigue isn't about tired adrenals. It's about a brain that actually thinks you're under attack.
Welcome to the True Wellness Podcast with Dr. Z, where we explore what it takes to live with vitality, balance, and purpose. I am Dr. Z, and each week I will bring you powerful tools, inspiring stories, and expert insights to help you thrive in every area of your life. From health and wellness to mindset and navigating life's challenges, this podcast is your guide to creating a life of true well-being. Be sure to check the show notes and grab your copy of the True Wellness Checklist so you can get started on your journey right away. Now, let's get started.
Okay, let me say something that might make you a little bit uncomfortable. If you are a high-performing woman who is exhausted, gaining weight, wired at night, foggy during the day, just trying to find the stamina to keep yourself out of overwhelm and exhaustion, well, your problem is not your hormones. Your problem is not your thyroid. Your problem is not that you need a better supplement or a different supplement. It's that your nervous system has been living in an emergency mode for way, way too long. And the thing is, emergency mode will rewire everything. So if you feel like, hey, I used to handle more than this and now I can't, or I used to be sharper than this and now I feel like my brain is gone, right? Or I used to have more stamina than this. I used to be able to do more. And I mean, it's not aging. It's not all these different things that get blamed. Okay. And you're not imagining it. So your body, it doesn't just break. What your body does over time is it begins to adapt. And so today I'm going to show you exactly how that adaptation happens and how we then reverse it. So let's dive in. So what really is adrenal fatigue? Let's get accurate about this, because adrenal fatigue is, I mean, it's not technically recognized in conventional medicine. In fact, doctors will tell you it's not real. But here's the truth. So the term adrenal fatigue is sloppy. The physiology of what's happening, though, is not. It's not that your adrenal glands get burned out. They're not like dead batteries, so to speak. What's actually happening is there is a dysfunction in what we call the HPA axis. Okay. That's the hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal axis, right? Or the hypothalamic, pituitary, adrenal axis. Now, that's your stress command center. Okay. Your HPA axis is your stress command center. And think of it like a three-way radio system. So it's like your brain senses stress. It sends a signal that goes to the pituitary. Okay. And then the pituitary goes ahead and it says, hey, ding, 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 adrenal glands. Hey, it's your turn now. Right. And the adrenals then release the cortisol. Now, cortisol in and of itself is not bad. Cortisol, it's important. It's part of what gets us up in the morning. It is necessary. Okay. It wakes us up. It mobilizes glucose. It sharpens our focus. It keeps our inflammation in check. So the problem is not cortisol. Okay. The problem is chronic unresolving activation. Your body's constantly in this cortisol mode, constantly in this fight and flight. So your body was designed for acute stress. Okay. So now you're at work, you miss a deadline, and guess what happens? Your cortisol spikes. Done, right? Maybe. Or maybe like you're almost in an accident, heaven forbid, cancel, clear, delete, but you're in this they all of a sudden, you realize what's happening, your cortisol spikes, and then done. It's over. But what happens with high performing women is they don't necessarily experience this acute stress. You experience ongoing decision load, responsibility, like for everyone, not just yourself, emotional containment where you trying to just hold it together all the time. Maybe there's pressure of productivity. Maybe there's constant mental engagement where you never have peace and quiet inside your mind. And your body, it can't distinguish between, oh my God, there's a tiger in the bushes that's coming to get you, or oh my gosh, it's another email at, 9:47 p.m. So both your body sees both of those as a demand. And if the demand never stops, then cortisol never actually begins to reset. And this is where we end up with the problem. This is now where we have dysregulation. So imagine that your stress system is like a thermostat. Okay. It's like the thermostat in your house. And normally the heat rises, right? And when it gets to a certain temperature, if you have the heat on, not the AC, when the heat gets to a certain temperature, the thermostat then turns it off. And now what happens when the thermostat turns off? The room begins to cool down again. If the room gets too cold, then the thermostat turns back on again. It keeps itself in balance. Now, imagine what happens to that thermostat if the sensor actually gets damaged. So, okay, it keeps thinking, oh my gosh, this room is freezing. This room is freezing. So it keeps blasting the heat. And eventually, what happens is the house overheats. The system gets strained. Maybe the wiring gets distorted. Well, your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis works the same way. When stress is constant, what happens is that cortisol pattern begins to flatten. So instead of having that nice peak of morning cortisol, that morning cortisol may actually drop. Or instead of having your cortisol come down in the evening, maybe your cortisol is going up. And so your sleep becomes fragmented, your blood sugar starts going all over the place. And then it's like this cascade begins. So let me tell you about the cascade. Okay. So it's the cortisol cascade works like this. So cortisol, it actually, chronic cortisol elevation does several different things simultaneously. Okay. So, number one, it causes blood sugar instability. So, cortisol raises the glucose in the bloodstream. And if this happens over and over and over again, well, what begins to happen too is insulin begins to rise. Then, because insulin is like always on the rise, we've got what's called insulin resistance that begins to creep in. So it's like the insulin comes out, but it's like it's been knocking on the door so many times that you've become resistant, or your cells have become resistant to hearing it. And as a result of that, now what happens? Fat storage increases, especially visceral fat. So that belly fat, right, or that belly weight that occurs, especially as we enter those years where our cortisol seems to be going off the charts in our perimenopausal, menopausal years. So that belly weight is often cortisol driven. Okay. Now it does something else. It suppresses the thyroid. So we're wondering why. I mean, first of all, why is it that everybody and their mother and their grandmother seems to have thyroid issues today when that wasn't the case years and years ago? This is one. Toxicity is a big reason, but this is one of the reasons why. So chronic stress reduces the conversion of thyroid hormones. So you have T3, T4 and T3. And when you're chronically stressed out, right, your body needs to convert the T4 to T3. Think of it like Think of it like the crude oil that comes out of the ground versus the gasoline that you need to actually run your car. Well, that conversion needs to take place with the thyroid hormones. So, this, for example, is why many people can have normal labs, but then their intracellular signaling is actually blunted. So now you're feeling cold. Now you're feeling foggy. You're feeling slowed down. You're feeling puffy, and it's not because your thyroid is dead. Heck no. It's because your nervous system is actually suppressing the metabolic expenditure. Okay. There's another thing that happens, and that's the progesterone drop. You see, when we are chronically stressed, okay, that stress steals from progesterone production. And low progesterone means, okay, our anxiety goes up, our sleep gets worse, we get PMS. And so the cycles, your menstrual cycles, they begin to shorten, they become erratic. And now you're thinking like, oh my God, is perimenopause? Gosh, oh my gosh, right? But stress load is actually amplifying that shift. Okay. And we have more. That's not the only things that are happening, you guys. What about your digestion? So, when we're in that chronic state of stress, your digestion begins to shut down. So now it's survival mode because the blood is no longer needed in your digestion. It's going to your extremities because you've got to run from the tiger that's hiding in the bushes. So blood leaves your digestive system. Your stomach acid begins to drop. Your stomach motility begins to slow down. And as a result of all these things, plus your microbiome, that's all the gut bacteria, all that stuff that should be in there keeping you nice and healthy, that begins to shift. So now you're bloated, you're constipated, you're sensitive to every food that you eat, you're not absorbing your nutrients, and you're wondering, like, okay, well, how come my supplements don't work? Right? Well, you can't absorb them properly when you're in that survival mode. So, high performing women, they're especially vulnerable to this. Okay. I mean, let's talk psychology and physiology, right? High performing women, they often have really high internal standards. Okay. They want to be the best. They want to get things done right. They're like a little bit of type A ness. They typically have strong self discipline. So they're doing a whole lot, and then they have really great emotional suppression capacity. So they can keep their emotions in check. Okay. And they have this high cognitive load. So they can think, they can process, they're really smart, they go at things, and they have an identity that is tied to productivity. So who they know themselves to be is someone who is spot on, who is productive, who is raring to go. High performing women, they're capable. You are capable, which means you override signals. So you push through, whether you've got fatigue or your mood is shifting or you're losing sleep or you're stressed out. Okay. You push and push and push until pushing stops working. Like here's a metaphor. Imagine that your nervous system is like a credit card. Stress is the spending, recovery is the payment. So, what happens with the credit cards, high performers, it's like they're constantly spending, 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 but rarely paying it down in full. And so, eventually, interest compounds, and burnout is that compounded interest. Okay. And then we end up in this space. So now we have to rebuild. So let's talk about what I call the burnout recovery blueprint. Okay. In order for high performing women to rebuild, it's not aggressive. It's strategic. So phase 1, this is kind of what needs to happen during the first couple weeks. Phase 1 is about stabilization. The goal is to convince the nervous system that it's safe. So what does that look like? It looks like in the morning when you wake up, you get that sunlight into your eyes. Within that first 10 to 20 minutes of rising, direct retinal stimulation, it actually resets your circadian rhythm. It improves your cortisol timing. It means that you're eating protein within that first 60 minutes of getting up so that you're stabilizing your blood sugar, you're reducing the cortisol driven glucose spikes. It means no caffeine before food, right? I mean, I have a joke in my office about, where coffee should go. All right. But coffee on an empty stomach actually amplifies your cortisol. I'll say it again. Coffee on an empty stomach will amplify your cortisol. Okay. Another thing you can do to stabilize is have structured meals. Have 3 structured meals a day. No grazing, just predictability, because for your brain, predictability equals safety. Okay. Or midday, you take that 5 minute or that 1 minute parasympathetic reset. It's just like slow nasal breathing, for example, where you have an emphasis on a really long exhale, or a consistent sleep window goes a really long way. Same bedtime every night, same wake time every morning. You are working to retrain your rhythm, because rhythm restores safety. That's phase one. Phase two is where we rebuild metabolic integrity. So now we've got to layer in the other stuff. So maybe it's strength training 2 to 3 times a week. Maybe it's walking immediately after all of your meals. Maybe it's making sure that you get your minerals in and you're repleting your minerals on a regular basis. I love magnesium glycinate, for example. It's making sure that your diet is anti inflammatory, it's gentle. You're not doing any crazy detoxes that I don't know. I saw a sardine diet someone was doing. So it's not like this crazy thing where you're eating only sardines, or you're not eating for 3 days, but just really gentle, providing your body with nutrients. It's not about aggressive fasting. It's not about high intensity exercise overload. I mean, you can earn intensity, but not until you restore that nervous system, right? So that's where we come to phase three, which is really about restoring hormonal signaling. So once you've calmed things down, once you've got the body into that point of stability, now we can do things like support progesterone naturally, improve your thyroid conversion, okay? Work on the protein, reduce your inflammation, fix your gut, right? Your gut, healing your gut is so critical to your overall physical, mental, emotional well being. And hormones stabilize when the nervous system stabilizes. A lot of my clients at South Bay Wellness, they are perimenopausal, menopausal women, and they're like, "Hey, Dr. Z, what about HRT? Should I be doing hormone replacement therapy?" And my answer is always the same, right? Like, let's work with your body first. Let's figure out what it is that your body needs naturally, because when you begin to stabilize all these other things, especially your nervous system, right? Then the body can actually operate the way that it was designed to. And our bodies were designed to go through menopause. It is part of our natural, normal life cycle. And I don't believe God makes any mistakes on how that's supposed to be. So that order is really important. You know, one of the issues with high performing women, though, is there's this addiction to stress. Okay. So here's a deeper layer. Some women are biochemically accustomed to stress. Yep. Cortisol, adrenaline, they create alertness, they keep you going. So alertness becomes an identity, and calm can feel unfamiliar. So maybe even almost uncomfortable. And I say that because, I'm always I'm always an adrenal recoverer. I'm like in adrenal recovery, paying attention to my nervous system because, yeah, for me, that type A ness, the doing it all the time, that alertness, it is part of my identity. And so, I've even said things like, well, I'd rather be busy than bored. But really, having time to ourselves, having time for calm, having time for peace is what brings us into that regulated nervous system. And 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 regulated nervous system, by the way, it doesn't mean passive. Regulated means efficient. It means energy without having spikes and crashes. It means focus without needing anxiety to create the focus. It means strength without collapse, which is power. Say it again. Strength without collapse. That's power. So I hope that you're walking away with some very specific things to begin to do to actually get out of that space of what we call adrenal fatigue and pay attention to really rebalancing your nervous system and stepping out of burnout. And I'll tell you, if this episode, if it resonated with you, start with stabilization. That was phase one that I talked about several minutes ago, right? For the next 7 days, focus on getting morning light, getting protein at breakfast, no caffeine before food, walk after each of your meals, go to bed, wake up at the same time. Track how you feel. And I'll tell you guys too, I'm going to give you a very special gift. So I have created the 21-day nervous system calibration. And the nervous system calibration that happens for 20 days, it walks you through step by step by step, like through short practices that you can do throughout the day. In fact, it's every day we send you anywhere from 1 to 2 of these short practices. Like, so you get this text reminder to like breathe and then you stop and breathe, or you get a text reminder that reminds you, hey, are you thinking in story, or are you actually looking at the facts? Or hey, take a moment to just push your feet down into the ground and feel your feet, because little short daily practices like this, they create that strategic rhythm for restoration. And that's what we need as high performing women. So that is a gift from me, by the way. So the 21-day nervous system recalibration, it's yours. I'll put the link in the show notes. For those of you who are listening, I'll tell you what the website is. It's just go.southbaywellness.com calibration registration. So go.southbaywellness.com/calibration registration. So go ahead and check that out. Start with safety, then build from there, because burnout is not about pushing harder. You cannot recover if you're pushing harder. It's about restoring that coherence. And when your system is coherent, when your system is operating as it should be, when things are flowing, everything else will follow.
This is Dr. Z reminding you to tune into your body, connect with what matters, and embrace your journey to true wellness. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with someone who's ready to redefine their health. Be sure to grab a copy of the True Wellness Checklist right in the show notes. Let's keep redefining wellness and empowering change together. See you for the next episode.